Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Green Nurse Podcast, where we bring hope and inspiration for growth and healing. We are here to change the dialogue and stigma around what it means to feel good and be high. Hence the H for hope, I for inspiration, G for growth, and H for healing. You deserve to feel good. We all deserve to feel good. And here is a little clip on what we do in the cannabis space as nurses, and then we'll dive right into the show.
Change the paradigm of healthcare.
The Green Nurse is a holistic cannabis nurse that teaches on the endocannabinoid system and the safe utilization of cannabis and other progressive tools to help people reach a better quality of life.
I'm the founder of Holistic Caring. We're based here in California, and we do educational programs and case management for patients on how to use cannabis therapeutically as a medicine.
We're also here to decrease stigma around what it means to feel good and be high, hence the H for hope, I for inspiration, G for growth, and H for healing.
As the founder of Holistic Caring, I basically oversee the whole ship, and what we're doing is progressive education.
Cannabis actually supports all 11 organ systems, our immune system, and all the neurotransmitter signaling systems that give messages to tell our body to either do something or not do something. Because the plant was prohibited, it prevented health professionals, doctors and nurses from learning about cannabis as medicine.
I want to change the paradigm of healthcare, and us paving the way into a new vanguard of medicine.
It's about education, it's about empowerment, it's about teaching people how to feel good, bridging the gap from what they're not getting from traditional medicine, utilizing different plant medicines, adaptogens, tips, tricks, hugs, and nugs of information to support and nourish the most important system in our body.
It's a lot of soul work, a lot of love, a lot of discipline, and meditation. I'm using my life work as a testimony to others to learn how they can be their own hero and then go help heal the world.
And we are, as nurses, the game changers.
There you go. Growing in health, growing in cannabis. My name is Sherri Mack, and I'm the Vice President at Holistic Caring and the Green Nurse. I'm a cannabis nurse, patient advocate, and a very passionate podcaster here to change the paradigm of healthcare. So today's show is on inspired consciousness for healing with special guest, emergency room physician, Dr. Anoop Kumar. As holistic nurses, we have learned that the drivers of healthcare lie outside the conventional system and are modifiable by us as people, patients, and consumers. So how do we inspire consciousness for healing? Well, our guest here is going to help us with that. So I want you all to meet Dr. Anoop Kumar. He is a leading voice for health and healthcare transformation, bringing clarity to the full spectrum of clinical medicine, mind-body integration, and human potential. He is the co-founder and CEO of Health Revolution, a company building a complete ecosystem for healing, beginning with questioning the fundamental assumptions that keep the current disease care mode in place. Dr. Kumar is creator of Health Jumpstart course, which helps you to experience true health and take your power back. He is the host of the Healing is Possible podcast, and Dr. Kumar is board certified in emergency medicine and holds a master's degree in management with a focus in health leadership. He is frontline emergency physician, public speaker, and author of Michelangelo's Medicine and Is This a Dream? Welcome, Dr. Kumar. It's an honor to have you here today.
Thanks so much, Sherri. It was great to meet you a few weeks back and good to see you again here today.
Yeah. So, Dr. Kumar, we don't all wake up one day and say, hey, I'm going to be an inspired, conscious leader. I'm going to be, create a book, write a book on Michelangelo's Medicine. Is This a Dream? There's usually a compelling story that brings us to these types of things to go public and to share them with people. So would you share with our viewers what your background is as a doctor and what led you to transformational healing?
So I would say that before I became a doctor and before I even kind of went through the educational system that we all go through in elementary, middle school, high school, college, is I had a philosophical background. My parents were very much into Indian philosophy growing up. And that was, in a way, my primary education. Like we were always exploring these issues. We were there throughout the week, at the facility that we went to learn about this, to explore, to discuss. We were always encouraged to question, not to accept things, to ask why, to experiment. So that was like my first education. And then came the rest of school, which almost like couldn't quite compare. The depth and breadth of that just wasn't the same. And then finally, medical school came on. And then actually in medical school, there was quite a shift in my experience of life, had a pretty dramatic change in my experience that left me trying to reorient myself completely to life. So it was these two things coming together, this like major change that happened in my life one day, along with this background in philosophy and questioning and experimentation. When I put those two together, I just could not say anything about this, and that's when I started writing, and then the books came out and started speaking. And eventually I've gotten to a place where I said, no, this has to be shared with the world at scale to make a difference. The little pockets are great. They're a great start, but it's not enough anymore. We need this to be a widespread movement at scale.
Wow. Awesome. That's really great. So, basically, one of the things that we talked about, and one of the things that you lectured about, that I heard you lecture about at the Los Angeles Association of Healthcare Underwriters, was the big question that you asked the group was, what should we have learned from the pandemic?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I'm going to have you answer that for our viewers, because I think
Okay.
your point is is beautiful and needs to be
Okay.
shared.
So I would say there are two huge points. There's so many things we can learn from the pandemic. And even as I say that, there are more coming up into the mind. But let me say two major ones. Number one is that the health of one person is the health of every person. Like, I hope we have learned that now on this planet. Just like with our bodies, with anybody's body, let's say if there's an infection on one part of your body, be it your toe, your finger, your scalp, if it's not taken care of, it will affect the rest of the entire body. Right? Similarly, the human species is like one body on the planet now, right? We are a body politic, right? We are a body whole. We are a body together. And if that is infected or affected anywhere on the planet, guess what? There are no ends or corners to the planet. It's a sphere, right? And it goes round and round and round. And that's what we're seeing now. The health of one is the health of all. I think we as people, not just as individual communities, not just as nations, but we as people, as human beings, need to start seeing each other that way and support those policies that say, hey, wait a second, it's not that all the goods should be in one place, right? It's not that there are no people that don't matter anymore. We all matter. So that's one thing that maybe the biggest lesson for us to see. The other thing is how much power we have that we are leaving on the table. And this breaks my heart. As an ER doc, I was seeing it every day. The people that were coming into the hospital, by and large, the people that were severely affected by COVID-19 were the people who had comorbidities, were the people who had underlying medical conditions. Not across the board, but for the most part, that's true. And the CDC's own data shows that the risk of greater morbidity and mortality is higher with the greater number of underlying medical conditions.
Right.
And what really got to me, Sherri, is that after 2 years, 3 years, to reverse some of these underlying medical conditions, whether it's hypertension or hypercholesterolemia or type 2 diabetes, or even blood sugars being out of control, pre-diabetes, some autoimmune conditions, heart disease, I could go on and on. You can see changes in weeks to months with changes in the 4 engines. At Health Revolution, we call them nutrition, movement, connection, and rest. By revving these engines, right? You're seeing it right here, the Health Jumpstart program. By revving these 4 engines, a person can start to reverse and address these conditions within weeks to months. Doesn't mean the diagnosis will completely go away, but there will be a change in a person's health by attending to these. And yet there was no communication about this. Everything was about playing defense, right? And yes, there's a role for defense, but it also scares people if all you're doing is being taught to play defense. We can play offense. And the great thing about the four engines of nutrition, movement, connection, and rest is that it's offense not only for COVID, it's offense for every single condition on the planet. Just think about that. We're going after individual medications for individual diseases, individual conditions. Let's also ask the question, what are the things that work for anything? Meaning, what are the things that help balance our immune system and restore our immune system to begin with, right? And that's nutrition, movement, connection, and rest. So these are the two things. Number one, we are all one family. We are all one organism as human beings, no matter where we are on the planet. And number two, you have tremendous power. You have tremendous power. The data support it, and you can do something about this. So I encourage everyone to be inspired and start to work on this together.
There you go. I love that. Absolutely brilliant. I'm going to bring up a slide
Okay.
that I didn't show you before, but I'm going to bring it up because I think it's really important. And this was from McKinsey. Elizabeth actually presented this. And, health is mostly about what? Function, right? Functionality.
Yeah.
Healing is different for each person.
Yes.
And so as clinicians, we need to be focusing on what? Bio, psycho, social, spiritual healing. And would you agree, Dr. Kumar, that the drivers of healthcare live outside of the conventional system and are modifiable by us, by what we're doing or not doing in our lives? Would you agree with that?
Yes, I think that's 100% true. And that's why I say that modern medicine is complementary medicine. So I'm an ER doc, right? So I went to medical school. I did my training in emergency medicine. I'm board certified in emergency medicine. I didn't take an integrative medicine course. I didn't do anything that, other than my background and my experience, would be considered quite different. But professionally, I didn't take those courses. And yet I would say that I am a complementary medicine physician. I think it's true of allopathy in general. And that to me is not putting down my profession or what we do in allopathy. It's contextualizing it in a way that actually helps you the most, you, the person in society the most, right? Everybody needs to understand that modern medicine is not intended for health sustenance or for health potential. We at Health Revolution, we say health is the expression of human potential. That's what health is, the expression of human potential. So what does that look like? We'll get into this later, but what does that look like? How far does that go? We don't know, right? So when we look at taking pills and procedures, which is the majority of the treatments in modern medicine, it's either a pill or a procedure. Most of that is intended as a complement to the fundamental functions of life: nutrition, movement, connection, and rest. That's what sustains a human being. And the evidence is this, Sherri, and I said this in the talk at Lahu as well, which is that if you take pills and procedures away, most people will still live. Many people will still live, right? If you take nutrition, movement, connection, and rest away, nobody will live, right? So the question is, which is primary and which is complementary? We have to get this right. Modern medicine is seen best as complementary medicine, to be used in addition to the fundamentals of life. And so, yes, the fundamental drivers of health and healing lie outside of modern medicine because they're not actually exclusive to healthcare. They are health, they are life, and they're about human potential.
It's amazing. So how do we as clinicians foster that?
It starts with our own practice. So the four engines of nutrition, movement, connection, and rest, I didn't start out by thinking about it and think, what are the things, right? So when I experienced a change in medical school, I tried to figure out what are the things that keep me balanced. And eventually these are what distilled out, right? And I found that if I wasn't paying attention to one of these, then I wasn't as balanced. I wasn't as capable to do all the things that I wanted to do, right? So my potential was limited, is another way to say it. My potential was expressed more and more the more I attended to these, and the less I attended to them. And then when I cross-referenced that with books, when I started the Healing is Possible podcast and talked to so many people who have healed from so many conditions, I said, you know what? This is it for everything. Whether you go back 2,000 years and looked at what they were doing, whether you look at the monks in the Himalayas, whether you look at people who are interested in performance, whether you look at people who just want to reverse disease, chronic disease, whether you want to look at human potential, we call this the meta map at Health Revolution. It's a meta map. It's the map that crosses all the individual maps of disease reversal, chronic disease, acute disease treatment, general well-being, wellness, spiritual advancement, performance. It's the fundamental key same steps. Now, I'm not saying it's the exact same. Of course, it's personalized for everybody. But the overall categories that we have to attend to, and the direction we have to move in is the same. So yes, the fundamental drivers are lying outside of healthcare, and we start these by attending to these ourselves in our own lives. And that's where we have that knowledge, right? That's where that a certain kind of ability to speak about this comes from, is from living that.
From living it. Absolutely. So why doesn't healthcare know what health is? Right? Or why doesn't healthcare inquire into what health is?
Yeah. Well, so there's so many answers to that. One answer is simply that when we go to medical school, we start out by learning, anatomy, physiology, histology, embryology. You learn about the body and how the body works. And then at some point, we switch to pathology and pathophysiology, right? What goes wrong? So it's like there's this initial part where you're learning more about what goes right or what is right, because you need a canvas to start, right? So you need to know what the canvas is, and that's like anatomy and physiology and all the branches that are derived from that. But then at some point, medicine is about, well, what happens when the body gets diseased? And it's almost like once that switch flips, the rest of a career is then about disease. It's about researching disease. It's about what goes wrong. Of course, we're trying to figure out then how to change that or how to address that. But there's no question about this idea of health, right? I told you earlier, we talk about health as the expression of human potential. And usually when I say that, the room goes silent.
Yes.
Health is the expression of human potential. What does that even mean, right? So health is, of course, derived from the word heal, which comes from the word whole. So what does it mean to be whole? Well, there's a big problem there. We'll talk about this too, but even the way that we model the human being is radically incomplete. We show a part of the human being as the human being, so then we don't know what wholeness is. And then we can't explore what human potential is. And then, of course, we don't know what health is. And all of our studies are going to be about disease, not necessarily because it's malintentioned, but because that's how you're trained. And then your lens, it becomes kind of a one-track mind. So that's one answer as to why we're so disease focused. And then, of course, it becomes that once you're comfortable with something, then it's hard to see something else. Once your expertise is dependent on a way of looking at things, it's hard to look at it some other way, because then who am I as a doctor? So I think it also challenges our identity to have to look at these things in new ways.
Yeah. Amazing. And as nurses too, what we're finding is the future of healthcare is patient empowerment, right? Patients being able to make decisions that are best for them.
Yeah.
And as nurses, what we have found too, specifically in the plant medicine space is, and shifting as to how we take care of patients. In the conventional system, we're focused on body parts, the body.
Yes.
If we're lucky, we get to mental, emotional, but usually not unless someone's in severe crisis. And rarely do we ever get to spiritual health unless someone is dying.
Yes.
So what if we flipped the switch and did it backwards, right?
Yeah.
Started working with the person's spirit, really
Yeah.
connecting with them,
Yeah.
right? Biopsychosocial, spiritual. Let's lead with the spirit. Let's connect with our patients, and let's teach them how to have agency and to discover, take them on a journey to figure what's important to you and how do you want to live your life,
Yeah.
right? I wish a clinician had asked me that question when I was at my sickest.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the bottom line is, I think, you're absolutely right. We're looking at multimodals because it is the anatomy is just of the body. It's missing a huge piece of it, which makes up, healing. So basically the other thing too is, why aren't we talking about researching and publishing these stories in medical journals of people around the world who are healing from these incurable conditions? And also too, why aren't doctors wanting to talk about it? And I've got a couple of stories, too,
Okay.
that just dismiss,
Yeah.
just don't want to even engage in it. And I'm wondering what the thought lens is behind that, working with clinicians and physicians all the time.
Yeah.
What is your
So
thought on that?
partly it's what I said, it's a couple of the people that I interviewed on the Healing is Possible podcast. I asked them similar things. I said, what happens? So I had one lady who had rheumatoid arthritis, and who was put on several medications, including immunosuppressants. And she said, she told her doctor, she tried it and it wasn't really working that well, wasn't working as well as she wanted to. She was having side effects. She said, I want to try to manage this, holistically. I want to try things, including meditation, changing my food. And her doctor said, well, you're going to be in a wheelchair by the time you're 40 years old. Right. And kind of dismissed her. And of course, now she's past 40 and she's not taking any medications and she's managing herself. Right. And she feels much better. She feels energized. She feels hopeful. And, she knows so much more about herself and her health now and how to influence her health. And I could tell you so many more stories. And a couple of these people, most of them did not, but a couple of them asked their doctors to publish, their case reports, saying, hey, just write about this because there's so many other people. And usually the answer they get, so rarely they do get written up. Some of them do, you can find case reports, but in most cases, I think it doesn't happen because, number one, doctors don't understand it, right? It's not part of our pathophysiology, part of pharmacology, right? How you change something by meditating or eating a food, it's not as well understood. So if you publish it, then it's just kind of a big question, right? So, and we're not the experts anymore. Now, I don't think that's a good reason not to publish because that's the process of science. I think that's a highly scientific way to progress, to advance, to go forward, is to say, hey, I don't know this, but here's what happened. I saw this with my own patient. I don't know how to explain this and put it out there. That's the way to advance science, right? But usually what happens is a doctor might say, well, I don't have time, or I don't want to dissuade other people from doing this. I don't want to encourage other people to do this and dissuade them from taking, the standard treatments. That's another reason given. And usually this is given as a genuine reason because we feel like we understand the other thing better and we can help people better with this. But of course, if you don't talk about how people are healing, that's just nuts, because then you can never actually help other people heal who would have healed. So I don't think we have great reasons. I do think we have to be very forthcoming when we do it, because there is a risk that when we say this, one person tried this, it was totally beyond what's typically done, and they healed completely. Well, naturally, a lot of people are going to gravitate to that, and we need to say at the same time that it doesn't mean it'll work for others, but here are the possibilities, here are the side effects, and now you can make your own choice. Talk to your doctor, have the conversation, understand the benefits and the risks, and make your own choice. We have to be able to have that conversation. And I think it scares us to have that conversation because it threatens what we know. It kind of threatens even the patients that we have. We don't know how they will do. And I think that's really the driver behind these things that we have to change. We have to realize that good science comes from asking questions and from saying we don't know, as opposed to saying that the way we did it all along is the best way or the better way forward.
Yeah. Very good. Well, you had mentioned too, we were talking, a little bit, and you said we were going to talk about it later, about our model of anatomy being radically incomplete, right?
Yeah.
Why is our model of anatomy radically incomplete, right?
And
how do other healing systems in the world depict different models of anatomy for the same human being?
This is a really fascinating topic for anybody who wants to look at health deeply, right? And it's this. Basically, if you look at different cultures in the world, they literally have different models of anatomy, which should be mind-blowing, I think, right? So if you go to China or India or Australia or the United States or Canada or anywhere, we're all Homo sapiens sapiens, right? The species is the same, right? But if the species is the same, why do you have different models of anatomy? Why in China were they depicting meridians? Why in India are they talking about chakras, right? And why in the West are we mostly focused on organs, like physical organs like bones, muscles, liver, etc.? So why is the focus different in different cultures at different times? And can we really say that millions of people are just off or are just wrong about human anatomy, right? No, what's happening is that people's perception is different. As the mind is, so is what we see. So, I mean, we all know that when you go into a dream state, you see a different world, right? And if you're in the dream state, you could not be convinced that this is a dream and that everything else is real and this is not real, right? That's just an extreme example. If you daydream, you can kind of shift between worlds. If you focus on an object, it might even start to look differently. It might look like it's moving, or look like the colors are changing, depending on the intensity of your gaze. So we know that based on the mind and based on the brain, that how we see and interpret changes. And it just so happens that different cultures had different ranges of mind and different foci. And so they saw the human being differently. I don't think that any of them is absolutely right or absolutely wrong. These are simply perspectives. I think it's really important to understand that anatomy is a perspective, right? So we have this one model of anatomy worldwide, and we believe that that represents the human being well, or well enough. And I think we're drastically mistaken. The structure of anatomy we have represents the physical human body well, but a human body is not the same as a human being.
There you go.
Everybody knows this. A human body is not the same as a human being. Otherwise, a cadaver would be just like a living human. Or the moment after a person passes and dies would be the same as 10 years before when they're alive. Of course not. Right? There is a difference between a human body and a human being. A human body is an aspect of the human being.
Right.
And so the physical anatomy, the model of anatomy we have now, is an aspect of what you are, a critically important aspect, and an aspect nonetheless. So then if we want a model of the human being, not just the human body, but if we want a model of the human being, now we have to ask, what are the other aspects that we are leaving out? And that's where all of these other models come in, including the chakras and the meridians, but including at a simple level, mind.
There you go.
Right? Whoever said that the mind is not a part of the human being? Whoever said that the mind is not part of human anatomy? Right? Probably half the world may say that it is.
Right.
So it's critically important that when we talk about the human being, in our model in Health Revolution, we talk about 5 bodies: the physical body, the mental body, the energetic body, the informational body, and consciousness. Consciousness being the core of what it means to be human, because it is that awareness that makes us aware of the informational body, the energetic body, which I said, the mental body, and the physical body. So there's this question of, at the heart of all this, I'm going way off with this question, Sherri. You're getting me out there in the wild, but we're going there. There's this question of, what is consciousness at the core of all this, right? I'm just looking at the title here, Inspired Consciousness for Healing. What is consciousness is a tremendously powerful question. There's our idea of consciousness, being in healthcare, being trained as a nurse. Everybody out there who's been trained in healthcare knows that, I use the word consciousness in the ER, but you know how it's used? It's used as loss of consciousness. When somebody falls and hits their head, you say, what's their LOC? LOC is loss of consciousness. Oh, there was LOC, there was not LOC. And depending on that, you might choose different, diagnostic or treatment pathways. So that consciousness is basically another word for wakefulness, or being responsive to the external world. But there are vast realms of consciousness that happen when we dream. Doesn't mean we're unconscious, right? There are people who have flatlined, who have shown no electrical activity in the brain, who have come back and reported the most vivid, rich experience of their lives, right? So consciousness is much more than the way we think about it now. And I think as we discover that, the core of what we are starts to open up. So that's the deepest body. And then that filters into the informational, the energetic, the mental, and then the physical body. That, my friends, is a complete model of human anatomy. And when you explore that, we get into what I call multi-directional healing, which is that you can start with any of these 5 bodies and influence it, and it shows up in the other bodies. Like if your mind feels good, it's going to show up in the physical body, right? If your body feels good, it's likely going to show up in the mind. Well, that's just 2 bodies. What about the other 3? And now you get into multi-directional healing, which is not there when you have just a physical only model of the human being. It either works at the physical level or it doesn't, and that's it. There are no other options.
Right.
So we need to move towards a more complete model of human anatomy.
Wow. Amazing. So I'm hopeful that you'll be able to divinely orchestrate and create a beautiful model of what human anatomy should look like to incorporate all of those different bodies. I think that that's really fascinating and where we need to go, specifically in the plant medicine space, because this is what we're seeing a lot with patients that are coming into the plant medicine space, is their consciousness is shifting.
Yeah.
Right? You think about people, the endocannabinoid system does what? it regulates, it modulates the fight or flight response and the relaxation response. And as humans, most of us are walking around in the fight or flight response.
Yeah.
And so plant medicine in particular, can help shift our consciousness to help us get into the relaxation response, to be open to do what? To be inspired for new ideas, new changes, to grow and to heal in different ways, right? You cannot solve the problem with the same mind that created it.
That created the problem.
Your mindset.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think also that something that looks like a problem from one mindset can look like a solution from another mindset, right? So it's almost like a jigsaw puzzle or a configuration. Like the same puzzle, it looks like a problem when you're looking at that hole that's missing. But when you shift your mindset and you look at the whole scene and the picture, then you actually see the solution, right? If you're looking at the gap, you're seeing the gap. But if you look at the whole scene, then you can orchestrate, or you can derive, oh, what is the picture that's here? You can mentally see it, and then you'll find it, and you put it right there. So it's the same. What can we say? It's the same frame, but what are you looking at? How are you looking at that frame determines whether it's a problem or a solution.
Wow, really cool. So here was another statement that you had made that I'd love for you to elaborate on. So you wrote, the feeling of not being seen in healthcare, as well as the problem of clinician burnout, moral injury, is not just a problem with the culture of medicine. It is a problem of undeclared philosophy and incomplete science.
Yes.
It is not a problem of medical practice, but rather a medical knowledge. Can you elaborate on that? That's very powerful.
Wow, I would need an hour and some graphics to really do it, but I will do it. I'll give you the highly nutrient dense version.
Cool.
So first of all, the physician suicide rate in the United States is twice the rate of the general population. Just let that sink in, right? Physicians are killing themselves at twice the rate of the general population in the United States. What in the world is going on? How is this, how is this happening? And what does it say about our healthcare system? It's just, it's incredibly sad. It's beyond sad. Yeah. And because the physicians are supposed to be taking care of others, and if the suicide rate is twice that, how many people are just feeling terrible but not killing themselves?
Well, there you go. You have that compassion fatigue, right?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's why I'm doing all of this, because I feel like it's so critical for myself and to speak up. And when I see my colleagues and when I see what's happening, right? So with that backdrop, the understanding then is like, well, it's the practice. We talk about the EMR, the electronic medical record, and so much of our time is spent on computers, and we want to be spending time with patients more. And some of the administrative hoops one has to jump through to keep practicing. So there are many such reasons that deal with the culture of healthcare, and there's definitely truth to that. But I don't think anybody stops to consider that way before the culture, like when you start medical school, actually when you start probably elementary or middle school, we've already been untrained in a way of thinking about the human being that is going to lead to moral injury down the line. Especially if you then are tasked as a physician with saving somebody's life down the line. So let me try to expand on that a little bit.
Sure.
I've already talked about it some, right? A human being is not the same as a human body. A human body is an aspect of the human being, okay? When you are taught, as we all are taught by the time we're probably in 6th grade, if not earlier, that a human being is made of small parts, what we do is roboticize the human being. Okay, so all of us remember the molecular model kits, the little balls, and then you connect them with sticks, and you put them all together, and wow, we have a molecule, and here's H2O, and then you put a bunch of molecules together, and then wow, this is a cell, and then a tissue, and then an organ, and then the organ system, the organ systems, and the organism, you, me, right? No. that represents a fraction of what we are. That's not what we are, period, as we're all taught. Remember, it's almost like this revelation to kids. I feel like I don't know if I actually remember this or I just kind of sense this, like being that age, and it's almost like a revelation. Like, wow, this is what we are. It's amazing, and it's like this really cool, amazing moment in education, but it's grossly miscontextualized, right? And so what happens is that person grows up, and then they become interested in science, and then they go to medical school, and it gets absolutely concretized, because then you're in cadaver lab, you're doing dissections, and you see that, yes, big things are made from small things, just like from Legos, and you put them all together, and you have this idea that you stack a bunch of atoms and you get the human being, right? At least in medicine. Now, as human beings, we know more than everybody knows. At least at home, you have different conversations, you feel something different. But the point is, the training roboticizes the human being. It's just an inevitable side effect. Even with the best of intentions, even with the most caring people, if your training says this is what this person is made of, and this is how we look at anatomy and physiology and treatment, then there's going to be that sense that we are squeezing a person into a machine-like model. And guess what? That's not just the person in front of us as physicians, that's ourselves. Because we know we're learning about ourselves just as much as we're learning about the other person in front of us. And what happens is, I think the science, which is incomplete, puts a straitjacket on us, right? And the philosophy, no physician, at least the vast majority of physicians, are not taught that we have learned philosophy. The vast majority of anybody on this call, right? Unless you were a philosophy major or went into it yourself, nobody was taught. No teacher came into your class and say, well, guess what? It's Monday. We're going to learn philosophy. It's the physical stuff that matters, and mind is made from the brain, and the brain is primary and mind is secondary. Nobody said that. It's just automatically assumed. Right. So what happens is we cleave the human being, invest at half. We look at the physical aspect. We say, this is what the person is. And then we wonder why moral injury happens down the line when we're trying to squeeze a person. Because once you do that, it's okay to do so many things that minimize the humanity in healthcare. So that's why I say, and to get into the incompleteness of the science, we get down to the point where we ask what a human being is made of up until the level of particles, right? We talked about this in the lecture. How you go from organs to molecules to cells to atoms, and then finally you get down to subatomic particles and elementary particles, but then we stop. We don't ask what that is made of. And at that point, that's where physics takes over, quantum physics takes over, and we say that the smallest things in the world, the elementary particles, are made of unbounded fields of energy. And there's so much interpretation now as to what the significance of this, what this means. But this, to me, is really where this mind-body connection gets revealed through the physicalist model. I don't think this is necessarily the only way to get there. I don't think it's necessarily the best way to get there. But given the limitations of our training of atomicizing the human being, if I may make up that word, then I think we have to look at this potential, this possibility, this point of going beyond the smallest things and realizing that the very smallest things we're made of are actually aspects of unbounded fields of energy. What is the significance of that? What does that mean? That's the science that we have to complete to see those deeper layers of anatomy that I was talking about, including the energetic, informational, and consciousness.
Yep. The energized body. There we go. The energetic body that we never talk about for sure. Energy healing is real. And we'll be talking about that in our next show for sure. So also, let's just talk about patients as well. Here's another one. So even patients are not being seen in healthcare. And now I kind of understand why. Because clinicians see them as a body. A human body as opposed to a human being. And that just kind of rang true for me. So a lot of times, we'll have patients that come to us in the cannabis space that have been literally traumatized by the pills and procedures. They're not being seen. They're not being heard. No one understands them. They're inquiring about cannabis and doctors aren't willing to talk about it. So they're left confused and they come to us a mess. And so, and just because you are an emergency room physician, I'm sure you see a lot of people coming into the ER with substances on board.
Yes.
What are your thoughts in regards to cannabis and psychedelic use for healing for consciousness, for inspiring consciousness, and for healing and for transformational change. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah. So I just want to take one step back and say that, yes, I think that physicians, that despite doing our best, right, even as human beings, even as caring people doing our best, the training is still limited. So it's the training that I think we have to change. I think it's across the board, not just in medical school, but even in schools, to talk about these more expanded perspectives. Now, regarding cannabis and psychedelics, a couple things. So I know you mentioned plant medicine so much, and so much of what you do is around plant medicine. I mean, plants are the original medicine, right? And beyond that, plants are food. So there's another saying, food is medicine. Yes. So food are plants are medicine. Like, it all goes together. And so it's weird that it's become novel. I can understand it, but it's like the original, it's the way people have lived forever, until we began to see pills as medicine at some point. And by the way, many pills are derived from plants, of course. Many of the most important pills are derived from plants. So yes, absolutely. I think plant medicine has a huge role to play. With regard to psychedelics, I think what psychedelics do is they open up areas of the mind that are shut down in our society, right? It's almost like going into a stuffy room, and opening up windows that you didn't know were there, that let the light in and let some fresh air. And you're like, oh, I never saw this corner of the room because I never opened this window. There was no light here. That's what a psychedelic does. Now, it has to be done well. I think we'd all agree it has to be done well. It can be done well. It can be done not well, right? So sometimes maybe I can't handle what I'm seeing in the room now, right? Because I've let this new light in and I haven't prepared myself. I haven't been equipped. And my whole thinking, my way of thinking, my lifestyle, my schedule doesn't gel with what I'm seeing in this room now, right? That might scare me. That could cause problems. So as with anything, new perspectives are powerful. How do we channel that power becomes very important. So using psychedelics with the right people who have not just had cool experiences or had cool insights, but have learned to integrate it in their life, right? Learn to stabilize at a new level of function, at a new level of insight. That becomes critical. And I think that's what's really important in the space today. I think there's huge potential with psychedelics. First of all, depending on the society, I think so much can be a psychedelic. Meditation can be a psychedelic. Going to certain places can have psychedelic effects. So I would use psychedelics very broadly. And the truth is the same for all of them, is they can be powerful. It's always good to do it with a guide, or with somebody who's been there, at least, somebody to talk to. You have questions, or who can kind of guide you through that process. And I think it will open up windows that we have been taught to close, that I think are going to have the capacity, when done well, to unleash the human spirit.
Awesome. Excellent. Thank you so much. So finally, what does inspired consciousness for healing look like? So let's talk about Health Jumpstart and how you work with patients in your program. This is really, really exciting stuff. As clinicians, as nurses, as cannabis nurses, we teach on the endocannabinoid system and the endocannabinoid dome, which incorporates the endocannabinoid system and all of the other neurotransmitter signaling systems, hormonal signaling systems, the lipid dome, and the microbiome, and how we can support and nourish that for overall health and wellness. And it includes your 4 pillars. And I spelt movement wrong. I apologize. Nutrition, movement, connection, and rest.
Yes.
So I want to really dive into your program.
Okay.
Talk a little bit about that, and about the 4 engines, why they're important, and how you work with patients in your group.
Okay, great. So the way we look at it is we work with people, right? You don't have to be a patient. This isn't a doctor-patient relationship. We are explorers. We are exploring health, and we are activating our human potential. That's the way we look at it at Health Revolution. Because as we said, we're looking at this as a meta map. It's not just for a patient, for a person who identifies as a patient, or a person who identifies as a wellness enthusiast, or a person who identifies as being spiritually interested or spiritually advanced, or somebody who identifies as performer or being interested in performance. This is a meta map that crosses these categories. And we're simply talking about human potential. What are the things that activate human potential? And so when it comes to this Jumpstart program, the root of it is really, seeing patients in the ER who are looking at me, not saying in words, but it's like, what else? Like, what else do I do? I've done what you've said. I've tried this, I've tried that, and it's still happening. What do we do? This is what we do to activate human potential. So let me talk about these 4 engines of nutrition, movement, connection, and rest. Nutrition is nutrition of the body and the mind. First comes nutrition of the mind. And that, Sherri, is what we're doing here. I mean, how good does it feel to be in a conversation with you here talking about this stuff, right? It just feels good. It's nourishing, right? And that's where it starts, is by the stories that are healing, that are about human potential. I'm not talking about just positive thinking at any cost. I'm not talking about making up things just to feel good. I'm not talking about fake smiling. I'm talking about conversations that genuinely inspire, because there's truth there. And every person is free to experiment and try for themselves, right? That's nourishing. That's nourishing the mind. Nutrition of the body includes, first of all, there's so much advice on diet, right? And a lot of it conflicts.
Yeah.
But there's nobody, no matter how much you fight, who says, yes, eat lots of processed food. Nobody says that. All right. So that's number one, what I say. No matter what your belief is about food, to limit or cut out processed foods is one of the most powerful things you can do to heal from anything. Right? You want to go ahead?
Yeah, I'll just have to say my big
Yeah.
thing, you're going to laugh when I'm teaching and educating on nutrition. We need to avoid fast food, fried food, fake food, artificial flavors, artificial coloring, trans fat, hydrogenated oils, high fructose corn syrup, and sugar.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah. Added sugar as opposed to the natural sugars. Yeah.
natural sugars, right?
Absolutely. And that's so another way to say everything you just said is eat food, not stuff that's not food, So that's number one. And the other thing is a plant predominant diet. So eating plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables is key to this also. And there's lots of studies, especially people don't even know there are people who have reversed heart disease using a plant predominant diet. So understanding these aspects of eliminating processed foods and a plant predominant diet is key to nutrition. What is movement? So for all of these engines, it's across the mind and body, right? So movement is, of course, yes, exercise. But you know what? Not everybody likes exercise. Not everybody can do exercise, right? But everybody can move to some extent, in some way. And I'll tell you why. So one is movement of the body, as in range of motion, right? So I like to say, if you have a joint, use the joint, right? So even if it's this tiny joint, right? What we call the DIP, the distal interphalangeal joint, move it, let it move. If it can move, let it move, and everything, right? You can do a little dance to it too. So the point is, from the deeper perspective, body and mind, we didn't get into this mind-body flow theory, but the body is the flowing mind, as we like to say. So if you can move the body, it helps move the mind as well. So that's range of motion. Moving the breath is another key one, right? Shallow, fast breaths associated with anxiety, right? Deep, slow breaths associated with more calmness, more stillness. And in fact, you can see that in the ER. If there's one person who's breathing slow and fast, another who's breathing slow and deep, whoever is more anchored in their feeling will bring the other person towards them. So either the anxious mind will become more calm, or the calm mind will become more anxious, depending on who is more anchored in their experience, right? So breath is critically important. Breathing from the diaphragm, breathing fully, as opposed to breathing from up here at the neck.
There you go. ABCs. Always be celebrating. Airway, breathing, circulation, right?
Right.
Peace
Absolutely.
begins with me, inhale, Ananda, right? That breath, that deep breath. When we take that breath in, what are we doing? We're circulating oxygen-rich air all throughout our body, nourishing all of our systems.
Yes.
Breath work is so, so powerful.
It is really incredibly powerful. So that's a key part of movement. So we talked about range of motion. We talked about moving the breath. Another huge one, Sherri, I'm sure you'll agree, which we have seen people heal over and over on our podcast, is moving your emotions. Emotions that we hold on to from decades ago. I don't want to say people, because me too. Like, I also have to address this, right? Things that we're holding on to from decades ago that get physicalized, essentially, in the body, as something with the back, or something with the stomach, or something with somewhere. And then when we look at it again, strictly from an incomplete anatomic model, we can't figure it out. Why did this show up? Well, if you only look at the human being as a physical structure, we'll never figure it out because we don't see it at the ingredient stage before it became physicalized. So moving the emotions is critical. Then moving creativity. It's so important to just ask, what do I want? Like, what do I love doing? What do I want to say? What do I have to say? Like, whether people agree or not, what do I have to say? And finding someone you can say it to, even if you can just say it to a piece of paper with a pen. Finding somebody you can say that to express yourself is so critical. I could tell you so many stories about people healing from that. So this is movement of the body, movement of the breath, movement of our emotions, movement of creativity. All right. That's nutrition, movement. Next is connection, which is threefold. One is connecting with others, which is critical, right? So especially when people start going on the spiritual path, a big part of the spiritual path is coming into oneself and starting to explore that dimension. But ultimately, the outside as well. So connecting with others is a critical part of that, especially in the society. I talked about the number one lesson from COVID, we're all one body, right? That interconnection is so important, connecting with others. Another one, of course, is connecting with oneself. Who am I? What am I? What am I doing here? Why am I here? What do I want? Where did I come from? Where am I going? There are studies showing that people who sit with the existential questions, not because we're philosophers, there's no need for any training, no need to be a philosopher, no need to even consider yourself spiritual, but people who ask the deep questions and sit with them tend to be less anxious, right? Because you know what? Everybody has these questions, even if they're not verbal yet, even if they're not intellectualized and articulated. The sense of this question of where do I fit in? Where is my ground? Where do I come from? That sense is there deep in the mind. That's part of what it means to be human. So it's either subconscious or we make it conscious and we sit with it and we explore it. It's not about getting an answer. It's simply about recognizing the question and honoring that the question exists. And this is where meditation, mindfulness, and so many practices come in. So that's connecting with oneself. And then the biggest one, which I consider a cheat sheet, not a biohack, right, Sherri, is connecting with the planet. All right. Getting outside with your bare feet in the soil or in the sand at the beach is an absolute must. And now we have studies showing that there's electron transfer happening between the human body and the earth body. Right? There is that electrical connection, and there are associations of that with decreased inflammation in the body. Inflammation being the major pathway and highway to so many diseases, a variety of diseases, right? So the simple act of putting your feet in the soil, preferably in soil that's not laden with chemicals, right? In your own backyard where you have that choice is amazing. It's such a huge thing to do. If I go outside and do that, I can feel a difference within seconds in the body. So that's one. So we talk about four things when I say connecting with the planet. That's feet in the soil, sun on the skin, fresh air in the lungs, and eyes on the sky. Right? These four things. These four things, like in a matter of 30 seconds, you'll just your whole countenance will change. And eyes on the sky is a special one because the sky is the only place on earth where you can look up and you see only one thing, which is sky.
There you go.
If you look at ground level, you'll see, tree, another tree, a blade of grass, a car, a human, so many things. But if you look at sky, of course, there'll be clouds within the sky, but the sky itself is one. And that has a calming effect on the mind. That's basically the same effect as doing meditation for a while, the initial stages of meditation for a while. So I'd like to say it's a hack, and it's a hack because we are the earth. Like, we're made of earth, right? The ingredients of the earth are what the human being is constituted of. So it should just make sense that when we connect with the earth, it's almost kind of going back to the root ingredients, the root nutrients that we need. So that's connection with the planet. And finally, the fourth engine, nutrition, movement, connection, and rest. Rest is, of course, sleep. Getting the right amount of sleep we know is critical. But I would say one step beyond that, sleep is actually a kind of rest, right? Rest is not a kind of sleep.
Ooh.
Okay.
Ooh, say it again.
Sleep is a kind of rest. So that means that what we really want is rest, and sleep is one way to do it. All right. But it's really important to know that one can rest even while awake. I can be restful even when I'm having this conversation. Right. And if I am restful when I'm having this conversation, then the rest of my day is going to be that much easier. My sleep is going to be that much better. Right. Because there's a part of me that's already resting, and sleep is actually just further progressing along that line. So I would actually say sleeping and being awake now should not be thought of as opposites, should not be thought of as differences, right? The baseline human state is rest. Go ahead.
All right. So I have a patient that says, I'm laying in bed all night long and I don't feel like I'm resting at all. I'm definitely not sleeping and I'm wide awake. And there is a whole story going on inside there. So how would you, because it's a big question we get all the time.
I would say that, the mind is always telling us what needs to be done.
There you go.
Right. So if there's a story going on, it's like, well, time to explore the story.
There you go.
You know, that's what you do. Like, basically take what the mind is giving you. The mind isn't unintelligent, right? I think there's a lot of vilification of the mind. The mind isn't unintelligent. It knows what it's doing. And if it's bringing something up on the display, it's because it needs attention. So I would say get curious about what is happening in the mind, rather than saying this should not be happening in the mind. I don't want this to happen in the mind, and trying to, pressurize that pressure cooker even more, which is going to be no sleep because it's not going to work. Rather say, oh, okay, this is what it is. I need to explore this. And it doesn't mean it's going to be easy, because sometimes it could be decades worth of stories that need to be explored. But then making time for that during the day, saying, hey, I need to explore this. I need to get to the bottom of this. What that does is it releases that pressure, and eventually there will be an equilibrium that comes, which, by the way, are all facilitated by the 4 engines: nutrition, movement, connection, and rest. Each of these has a role to play. So if sleep is not working, look at the other 3 engines, right? And I guarantee you will depressurize and sleep will get better.
There you go.
So these are the 4 engines that we address each of these. We have 5 lectures and practices for each of these engines, for nutrition, movement, connection, and rest. So it's 20 in total. There's a talk, there's a practice, and then we have an ongoing monthly alumni meeting for all participants in the course. We just had ours last night. An amazing, amazing group, because everybody's practicing this. We get together once a month. The energy level goes up. Everybody gets energized again. So if do check it out. The website is healthrevolution.org/power, because it's all about your power. Check it out. Join us.
Absolutely. And we have in the comments below, there's a whole section that you can, website information where you can get in touch with Dr. Kumar and his program and services. So we're going to be wrapping this up. This has been an amazing, amazing, amazing show. I've got my CEO and founder, Elizabeth Mack, is going to come join us to wrap up the show. And she has an invitation for you.
Well, hey, Anoop, I've been listening in the wings and doing just a few notes, and just really taken aback by this conversation. Just so intriguing. And of course, exactly what we need to be discussing if we're going to change the paradigm of healthcare, which is what we want to do.
Yeah.
And expanding that conversation and giving everybody, patients and professionals, the tools that we need to have this dialogue. So with that, we would love to have you participate in our network in any way that you want, and to expand your vision and your message and your tools and your services, of course. And then writing on our newsletter. We're having some guest contributors, and we had a couple of doctors already on the list, and we're just so happy to have contributing editors, as well as doing the clinical webcasts that we do, our clinical conversations, where we break down conversations, and just really having you take this message to that audience as well, to expand this into our network and into the YouTube that lives in perpetuity, and we share that as much as we can. So that'll be just amazing.
Absolutely, yeah, I'd love to do that. I'll send you an article, and then love to participate however I can help.
Awesome. All right. So for our viewers, this has been Green Nurse podcast, Inspired Consciousness for Healing with emergency room doctor Anoop Kumar, Dr. Anoop Kumar, and he has Health Revolution. And you can see all the information down below. And remember, everyone, what it's about. It is about living your best life and helping others do the same. We'll see you next week.
We're here to educate and empower patients to make choices that are best for them. We're also here to decrease stigma around what it means to feel good and be high. Hence the H for hope, I for inspiration, G for growth, and H for healing. The Green Nurse is a holistic cannabis nurse that teaches on the endocannabinoid system and the safe utilization of cannabis and other progressive tools to help people reach a better quality of life.
I was cannabis agnostic for many, many years. And the more research I did, the more I discovered that cannabis is this amazing medicine.
I was told that I had a 4-stage pancreatic cancer. The doctor really told me he couldn't do anything else. He gave me her name and she called me and she came to my house. She started to give me cannabis. My oncologist was puzzled because he couldn't find the cancer anymore.
All of the learning that we get comes from the Green Nurses Group, comes from their support, comes from their guidance. I trust everything that she says.
Simply meet people where they're at. The plant doesn't, stress to grow, so we don't stress to share it. We're healing people.
Cannabis has been used as a medicine for tens upon thousands of years. Here's the big message. Cannabis needs to be federally legal. We need to have laws that are the same across all 50 states that allow access to anyone and everyone who wants to utilize this powerful medicine.